Well, the numbers would suggest that it's better than the national numbers.
That's true.
Whether it'll stay that way is, I think that's the $64,000 question. You know, whether we're going to be able to or whether we're insulated from the factors that have caused the national economy. I've been listening to economic development people tell me that Colorado is insulated for, you know, decades, and you know, then you
based on what?
Well, I think it's wishful thinking mostly.
There was a time, I would say, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, that our economy is much more diverse now than it ever has been.
No question.
During the 80s, the oil industry was so huge. Before that, we had agriculture, and they kind of would do this dance of which is the major industry.
Right.
Now we've got a lot of tech firms, biotech firms. We have a small manufacturing base. I mean, it is a much more diverse economy.
Yeah, you're totally right about that. I mean, it is more diversified, and in fact, that may be the big reason that. It may be true now that we may be able to weather the national downturn better than a lot of places have. The New York Times this week had this breathless piece by former Rocky reporter Dan Lizader, and you know, the analogy that he used was, you know, that all the efforts of the state in the past 20 years to build more diversity in the economy and infrastructure investments and things like that have created an arc that we can weather the storm. It's not we're going to avoid the storm completely, but we'll be able to get through it.
What do you think?
What's interesting about this time around is that I might argue that we got into this before the rest of the nation. We led the nation in foreclosures in 2006, much of 2006, we were #1 in foreclosures. I would argue that's because we were only one of 2 states, Alaska being the other, that didn't require mortgage brokers to be even registered with the state. So you had a lot of fraudulent loan activity that led to an extremely highest in the country foreclosure rate.
Did the same thing happen in Alaska then?
You know, I don't think Alaska is a good comparison state. I think their real estate up in Alaska is probably different than the other 49 states. But you know, the legislature came in and forced mortgage brokers to register, to license themselves, to bond themselves. They've arrested a heck of a lot of them and put them out of business. We are still in the top 10 in foreclosures, but we're down near 7 or 8. Our real estate, residential real estate in Denver is actually one of the 2 or 3 best in the country, and that's shown month by month pretty consistently over the last year by the widely scrutinized S&P Case-Shiller Index, which shows that for the year of '08, Denver's real estate depreciated 5.2%. Nationally, the average was 17.4%.
Wow.
So we got into it sooner. We seem to be coming out of it sooner, but that's only the real estate sector. You can argue that the subprime mess is what started this whole thing, but I would also say that there's not as much of a local economy as there used to be. You could take a square block in Greenwood Village and drop it into a square block in Omaha or San Diego or Los Angeles, and it would look exactly the same. The national economy and its woes are finally dragging us down with it.
When you say you think we got worse, or we got worse first, and we're going to get better first, when do we get better? What differentiates? Let me ask you. What would? All right. So we got in this earlier. If there were more foreclosures,
yeah.
Let's just keep with real estate for a second. What's going to pull us out of this? Colorado, and particularly the Denver metro area, has had one of the highest home values in the country. It's really expensive to buy a house in Colorado. We've got urban growth boundaries. You compare it to other places that have been much more affordable, like Houston, where there are no such boundaries, and you can buy a home much less expensively. You know, what pulls us out of this?
Depends on what city you're looking at, though, too, John. I mean, if you look at Washington, D.C. or Boston or someplace like that, we're still a bargain. I think the key question is...
That's because we don't have New Yorkers or Bostonites here.
Well, and we don't have a beach either. But I think the key question about the foreclosures, though, is has it washed through the system?
It hasn't.
Well,
I hear talk of the second round of foreclosures. First being subprime, and now some other types of
Altays and the other bundled mortgage devices that were used. Interesting. The guy who's made that, it was a 60 Minutes program about that, the second wave of the mortgage crisis. Interestingly, the guy said, well, what are you doing? You know, he was asked, well, what are you doing with your money? And I said, oh, we're buying equities right now, because he obviously thinks the market's already priced that downturn. And so his firm is buying equities, even though he's making these dire warnings about the second wave.
To Neil's point, the foreclosures have not washed their way out of the system yet. There are fewer homes for sale in Denver right now than there have been in many, many years. And that's because unless you absolutely have to sell your home, your job's moved you somewhere else, you're not trying to sell a house right now because you can't compete with the foreclosures that are on the market. And until those foreclosures are sold and people begin to feel better about putting their own homes on the market, you know, the foreclosures have not yet washed themselves out of Denver's market.
You know, I agree with that, but what I don't understand is why have the values not gone down more here than they have nationally? Is that because they've already gone down? They previously went down?
One possible reason is that Denver, in terms of annual appreciation in housing, only enjoyed double-digit appreciation in 1999 and 2000. Since then, we've gone up 4, 5, 6, 7% annually, compared to a Phoenix, San Diego, Las Vegas, Miami that had been seeing annual appreciations of 25, 35%. We didn't go up that high, and we don't have that far to fall.
All right, outside of real estate, let's bring it to the other sectors of the economy. You guys have been keeping an eye on this.
Yeah.
All right, so if we have this great diversified economy here in Colorado, it means we've got banks and large mortgage companies, we've got bond dealers, we've got tech companies, we've even got some good old-fashioned guys who make beer. Keep them here. How have they weathered the storm? And you're talking about foreclosures being up. What about bankruptcies? We've also seen bankruptcies coming up. What? The message being cash is still king.
Yeah, well, cash is always king, frankly. I mean, those companies, the companies that you mentioned, I think, they've been hurt by the overall tightness of credit and the weakened demand that's from consumers. You know, one of the ancillary effects of this decline in real estate value is that people had used credit cards to buy things, knowing that when they got overextended, they could take out a home equity loan and pay off the credit cards. Well, now with the real estate dropping, you know, a lot of people are underwater. They owe more than the home is worth, so they can't get a home equity loan. And so what do they do? What do you do in that? If they're employed and they're still making their payments, they cut back on their spending, and that I think is the big unknown out there, is how long is that reduced demand going to go on? The other thing that's playing into it is the age of the population. People are approaching. I mean, retirement for a lot of the boomers is not some dim concept out there, and with the decline in the market, they're looking at their portfolio and say, oh, I didn't save enough for retirement. And so what happens then? They cut back. They start hoarding their disposable income. You hear about this in the papers now, the new frugality. And you know, it's chic to be thrifty now, whereas just a couple of years ago that wasn't really the case. But that's having an effect on a lot of companies that sell to consumers. And you know, that's 2/3 of the economy, or 3/4 of the economy.
Frugality